himself for a month out there. So he brings on board, in one of the crates, he brings on board a woman from a nearby village from where from his castle, that they sacrifice to him, and so that he can have the blood supply he needs for the journey. So eventually, the crew find her, and they take her out of his hands. So now he's lost. He doesn't have any blood supply. So he starts attacking the animals. He starts attacking, eventually, of course, the crew. And they don't know what's going on, and she doesn't really know what's going on either. Yeah. Clemens is very unique in the way that he is one of the very few black men who were able to get into a university at the time, like Cambridge, like where he studied. But because of the color of his skin, he was never taken seriously when he applied for work afterwards, even though he was a doctor. So he kind of traveled around in a capacity that was near his father's occupation, and eventually ended up in Varna at the same time and going back to England. And he kind of, by some accidents and conviction, he gets back on board the ship. And his capacity as a doctor makes it possible for Anna to, when they find her, she's drained of blood, but he knows how to do a blood transfusion with very simple means, the way they did it back then. And he's able to sustain her life throughout the journey until more or less the very end. And in a way, therefore, keep her from becoming, a different type of presence. To me, Dracula is a 400-year-old man, and that should show in his character, and that should show in his presence in the movie. He's also, as the movie starts, or at least as we get on the boat and he loses his blood supply, he's a character who is like an addict, or he needs his blood, as we need food in a way also. So it's not just an addict, it's just necessary to live. So when he is deprived of that, he gets weaker and weaker, and he needs to go out and get it. So that aspect to him, the need to regenerate himself in a way, is a huge aspect to a certain section of the movie. But when it comes to the visualization of him, I wanted him to feel like an older man. I wanted him to feel like he is fragile. And in that way, make him, in a way, also desperate and dangerous. I also wanted Dracula to be, I wanted this to be the scariest depiction of Dracula, ideally ever, in a movie. That's at least the goal we have set ourselves. Because a lot of Dracula movies are dramas. They're also, it's an amazing broad story. They're trying to usually tell the whole story of Dracula from the book in some variation. And this is one of few movies that are really focused on just this, or specifically our movie is focused on one section. So that gave us an opportunity to go into just a section of the character, not necessarily deal with the whole range of aspects to the Dracula character. But we needed to always keep a sense of humanity to him, so he doesn't just become an animal, if you will, or a monster. He is a sophisticated character. I mean, he's a very sophisticated character. But in this instance, he comes down into this kind of feral, desperate, state. And that's what we wanted to make the movie about. And eventually he also evolves into something of a bat-like creature, which Dracula has the ability to evolve into many things. And definitely into this creature, and that's the one we focused on in the movie. One thing that preoccupied me in the process of building or creating the ship was that it was supposed to be very dull in a way. It had to be very everyday. It had to be like a cargo ship, not a beautiful big, whatever they're called, Um, it needed to be a very simple ship, but it also needed a lot of space. We needed to make it huge because they're supposed to walk around on the ship day and night and discover new things. So if the ship was too small, they literally didn't have enough space we didn't have enough space to tell the complex story that we're telling. So we actually built, I think, the biggest ship that has ever been in that tank in Malta, and I think that includes all of Ridley Scott's movies that are also shot there. So it was enormous, and we needed this vast space on top, and we needed it to feel like a labyrinth inside, with all nooks and crannies and dark spots and long hallways, and of course this big, enormous cargo hold, where all the boxes Dracula is shipping, where they're all held for the entirety of the journey. And that had to be graphic and impressive and kind of frightening as a place to be. And I also wanted the ship to feel very grounded and gritty and dirty and real. And so we had to go over the whole ship, and it was built with old material, and it was built with so many people who were sanding it down and making it look old and used, and we were going over it again and again to make sure that it just really felt grounded down from 50 years of use at sea. I wanted our Dracula to feel different than the rest of the Draculas I've seen. I wanted him to be more animalistic in the design of the teeth, not just two fangs, but crooked and kind of nasty looking teeth, and still able to hide them. So in society, he would just look like an older guy with bad teeth in a way. That's it. But on the set, when you see him with his teeth, it should be terrifying. It should be a mouth that should scare you in a way. I mean, we're just looking for a great actor to portray Clemens, and you talk about who that could be, and eventually his name came up, and we were all very excited about it, and really felt like he could portray a warmth and a charismatic character and be a lead in this movie. I mean, it was just, he has to wait to pull that off as an actor and the capacity, and he fell for the script, and we all had conversations with him, and we were just, this is gonna work out, so that's great. Corey is very engaged, he's very present, he's thinking all the time, he's trying to analyze his position in the scene, his position, his character. He worked tremendously with his accent, which is, of course, he's an American playing an English character, so that's a whole thing. And he really has his strive for authenticity is fantastic. And no, I mean, he was an absolute joy to work with.
I love Dracula films. I think a lot of people do. There's something about the myth and the legend, the lore, that is just, it's timeless, as is Dracula. It's crazy, but when people see it, I mean, you literally get chills down the back of your spine. But then the magic is also it's just also funny because I know it's Javier in there, like, and he's so, he's just so, I mean, this is what he does, but he's just so good at creating that, the way he moves, the way he turns his neck, the detail in this movie is so key. And he, you know, the way he takes his finger and you know, it just, there are no words. Honestly, that's why you have to put it on screen, because you can't really explain it. I think really what it is you're sitting with these people and you're watching them go through this experience that they have no choice but to go through. There's no way off this ship. And that evil is lurking right there below the surface. And yeah, it really puts you in a state that we don't get to live in sometimes in these times. You know, it's like we're all very comfortable, and the great part about this genre is that it pushes you outside your comfort zone.
We've seen there have been hundreds of iterations of bringing Dracula to life from both comic books to TV to screen, but there's never been a story about Dracula as scary as The Last Voyage of the Demeter. I believe that this is the first time I've ever seen Dracula portrayed in such a terrifying, unforgivably horrifying way, and that is something that I think has always been missing from the Dracula story. I love all the philosophical ideas that are wrestled with in the Dracula narrative. I love that he's been this erotic and dark and, you know, very cool character, but Dracula's definitely never been as horrifying as he will be in The Last Voyage of the Demeter. So you've never seen Dracula look like he does in this film. He looks like something out of your worst nightmare, something that's crawled out of the pits of hell, something that is the conjuring of an evil mind, and that is what Dracula is. We all fear death. We all stare at our mortality, and it gives us all kinds of emotions, but what Dracula represents and the endless feasting upon human life to sustain his own immortality is just a horror that is almost inexplicable. And in this film, the first time that you catch a glimpse of Dracula, you're never going to forget it. It's something that is, I believe, going to live with audiences for a long time and haunt their nightmares. This is a dramatic telling of one of the most incredible chapters of one of the greatest books ever contributed to the horror pantheon, and it tells a story of death coming in all of its horror for these people, just like it will come for all of us, and there's nothing, it seems, that they can do about it, and yet against all odds they're going to try to figure out a way to defeat it. And death has never looked as terrifying, death has never looked as intimidating, death has never looked as dark as it does in the embodiment of Dracula that our incredible actor Javier and the amazing makeup team who put together his appearance have done to see him stalking towards both these poor characters and the audience themselves. Dracula is coming for you.
There are moments in this movie that when I read the script, I was like sharp intake of breath stuff. What? There is fantastic jump scares. There is fantastic acting. We get actors to do proper scenes. This is it would do it a disservice to call this a horror movie. It is way beyond that. It's beautiful looking. Tom, our cinematographer, is incredibly talented, been in the game forever, Oscar nominated, the whole deal. There's a lot of big hitters involved in this. Mr. Steven Spielberg's company is making this movie. Big hitters. So we have to deliver the goods. And their wonderful, wonderful director and producer and Sepp Brad and everybody involved in this has gone the extra mile. It's nearly killed us on a number of occasions on this. They haven't spared anything trying to kill us on board during storms and stuff. I don't know how, I really should call my agent, or at least my psychiatrist. Now it's been a huge, if 1/3 of the adventure that we've had making it ends up on the screen, we will have a fine movie in our hands. So the first time I really saw our monster was when he was in my face, about to take a large lump out of my neck. And I'd said hello to him when he walked on board, but it's a lot different when the rain is going, the wind machines, all this noise, and you're doing something, even though it's in the script, you're doing something, you turn around and he's there in that magnificent makeup. And I really, genuinely, I really got a fright. And I got a fright not just in one take, but over and over. So if I'm getting a fright and I know the guy who's in the suit, hopefully that should transfer to scaring the bejesus out of anybody watching the movie. I think it will. I'm really sure it will. But he's incredible, and he's so physical, and Javier is a genius at physical acting. I suppose the original book, when Dracula came out, it became sort of a phenomenon, and it has never died away. and the amount of iterations we've seen of this creature. It's really interesting that this monster that's among us and only comes for us when it's dark, it plays to all the worst feelings that we have when we're kids in bed and there's thunder and lightning outside and it's dark, and it's monster time when the lights go out. So Dracula, not only 100 years ago, and not only now, but in 100 years' time, there will still be movies made about Dracula, because he's like the perfect monster. In some cases, he blends into society. There is no redemption with him. He wants to feed off you, and he wants to take your soul, turn you essentially into a zombie, a vampire zombie, and remove every piece of humanity from it. It's like the worst spiritual nightmare you can have, apart from just being ripped asunder, apart from the physical damage. He gets you in your soul, in your spirit. He's the perfect monster. Listen, you'll have a great time sitting at home. You can scream at who you like. When you're at home, you can throw your popcorn up in the air and it'll land on your own couch. I'm telling you now, my first time going to see this, I want to see it with an audience. I want to see it. I want to be in the theater, and I want to experience the screams all around me on this, because this does have scream moments. You can look around over your shoulder if you like. There's a good chance I'll be down the back going like that when I'm hearing everybody screaming. Get to the cinema. We've got all this pandemic stuff coming to an end. Some of the best times to be in a theater are at scary movies. Some of the best times to suffer with everybody else and scream in horror with everybody else is one of the great joys of cinema. Do this. Go to the cinema. Go and see this movie with hundreds of other people and be scared crapless with them.